Oakland, California Mayor Sheng Thao, the latest major Democrat to be targeted by this DOJ, is speaking out for the first time after the FBI carried out a raid on her home. A dozen agents spent several hours combing through the mayor's residence late last week and removed numerous boxes. And like so many political figures on both sides have been targeted by the feds, Mayor Thao is, of course, blaming the whole thing on politics, suggesting the FBI is doing the bidding of her well-financed political opponents and carried out the raid to help fuel the effort to recall her from office.
I want to know what probable cause the FBI has. What evidence have they collected that justifies raiding the home of a sitting mayor without notice and without the courtesy of a conversation? I want to know more about the handful of billionaires from San Francisco and from Piedmont who are hell-bent on running me out of office. I want to know why, the day following the qualification of a recall election, funded by some of the richest people in the Bay Area, seemed like the right day to execute a warrant.
Look, I don't know what the FBI has or doesn't have on her, but I do know that I'm getting really tired of almost every politician who is under investigation or who's been indicted claiming that corrupt law enforcement officials are behind it. The two sides go about it sometimes in different ways, but they both do it. On the left, like with Mayor Thao, the criticism is usually more narrow, focused on a small group of people, or sometimes one person, a centrist political rival, a racist prosecutor, an institutionalist bureaucrat. To hear these beleaguered Democrats tell it, there's always some boogeyman out there who has somehow manipulated the Democratic-run Department of Justice to take them down. Now, on the right, the complaints are more broad. It's all about the two-tiered, weaponized justice system. The Biden DOJ is corrupt and trying to take them out. Ignore all the major Democrats across the country have been targeted by the DOJ. It's just a cover. The feds are really just out to get them. It's all just getting old. Why can't they just argue their cases on the merits like everyone else has to do? Democratic New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez successfully did that in 2015, the first time he was indicted on federal corruption charges. A mistrial was declared as a jury that heard that case was split. The charges were dropped in 2018, and Menendez even won re-election. But this time around, in his current trial, where he's facing bribery charges, Menendez is playing the race card. In his statement after he was indicted, the senator said, quote, "Those behind this campaign to prosecute me simply cannot accept that a first-generation Latino American from humble beginnings could rise to be a U.S. senator and serve with honor. They see me as an obstacle in the way of their broader political goals." We heard a similar argument from former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, who was recently convicted on perjury charges relating to a false mortgage application. For years, Mosby and her allies have been pushing claims that she was targeted by the Biden DOJ because she too aggressively fought for racial justice and took on police misconduct.
I have done things as a prosecutor that a lot of other prosecutors have not done in this country, whether that is holding police accountable when a lot of other prosecutors in this country would not do so, whether that is ending the war on drugs, which we know was a war on black people in the city of Baltimore. I've gotten lawsuits, OIG investigations, state ethics investigations. They've been coming for my law license since I charged those officers in Freddie Gray.
All about the Biden DOJ's racism. It is always something with these political figures. They're always the victims. It's either racism or politics or anything but the actual crime being investigated or charged. T.J. Cox, a former Democratic congressman from California, charged in 2022 on 28 counts relating to wire fraud and money laundering. He, too, claimed he was the victim of a political prosecution.
Politics is a tough game. I wouldn't be in this position today, but for the politics, and I think we all know that.
Only Cox's lawyer now says he's on the verge of taking a plea deal. Now, Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush being investigated for an alleged misuse of campaign funds. She says the investigation was being powered by mysterious right-wing forces.
I am under no illusion that these right-wing organizations will stop politicizing and pursuing efforts to attack me and the work that the people of St. Louis sent me to Congress to do.
Then, of course, Hunter Biden's lawyers argued that his prosecution was political, saying that Hunter was a victim of, quote, selective prosecution because he's, quote, politically affiliated with his father, the sitting president, and a candidate for re-election. By the way, those are just a few of the examples of embattled Democrats claiming they've been politically targeted, one after the other. They blame the system, suggesting there are larger, nefarious forces at work. It is maddening. And on the right, by the way, Republicans' cries of a rigged system are often sort of more generic than the case-specific complaints you hear on the left, with many just widely and sort of in a blanket fashion insisting there's a two-tiered justice system that's been weaponized against Republicans.
Deserve to know that how the government is being weaponized.
It's two-tier justice, and I think the American people see it.
The degree to which DOJ has been weaponized trying to stop the voters from electing Donald Trump is ridiculous.
We are going to do everything we can to slow down this weaponized justice system.
There's a double standard of justice in America.
It's been a constant refrain ever since the FBI went into Mar-a-Lago and the federal charges filed against former President Trump. But all of this just ignores the facts. Since President Biden took office in 2021, there have been, by our count, 11 major Republicans nationwide who've been either investigated or indicted by the Department of Justice. And during that same span, there have been 12 major Democrats across the country who have been investigated or indicted by the feds. And 2 of those indictments, by the way, perfectly demonstrate how the system is not out just to get Republicans, right? Former Trump aides Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro were both convicted of contempt of Congress for defying subpoenas issued by the January 6th committee. Navarro currently serving a 4-month sentence, Bannon set to begin his next month, and both have relentlessly attacked a DOJ they claim is politically compromised.
When I walk in that prison today, the justice system, such as it is, will have done a crippling blow to the constitutional separation of powers and executive privilege. The partisan weaponization of our justice system, which we have seen come to this country with a vengeance since the coming of Donald John Trump as president, and that keeps getting worse.
DOJ is lying. The FBI is lying. All of them are lying, and we're going to hold them all accountable. And I'm not going to sit there and listen to Merrick Garland. I will not stand by silently. Well, listen, Pipsqueak, you're a lawless scumbag. How about that? Suck on that. And the FBI is a bunch of lawless Gestapo.
Okay, here's the problem. Navarro and Bannon can cry foul over their convictions all they want. But the DOJ actually went out of its way to avoid charging them. How do we know that? Because the DOJ declined to prosecute 2 other Trump aides who the January 6th committee referred for prosecution. 2 who at least made an effort to engage with their subpoenas and made some legal arguments as to why they shouldn't have to appear. Former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows refused to testify, but engaged in weeks of negotiations with the January 6th committee, handed over more than 9,000 documents. The committee wanted him prosecuted. DOJ said no. Longtime Trump aide Dan Scavino didn't show up, didn't produce any evidence at all in the probe. But at least he responded to the subpoena, negotiated with the committee, made legal arguments why he said he couldn't testify. Regardless of the merits of the arguments, they at least showed a respect for the process, which Attorney General Merrick Garland confirmed during a recent congressional hearing when asked why just Bannon and Navarro were charged.
What happened to Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon when they decided to defy a subpoena of the Congress?
We received 4 referrals, criminal referrals. 2 were prosecuted. They did not comply in any way, did not even appear.
It's not hard. If Bannon and Navarro had just minimally cooperated, responded, just as Meadows and Scavino did, they wouldn't have been charged. The idea that the Department of Justice is being weaponized against Republicans has just never been backed up by the facts. And that's particularly true of the FBI, which has never in its history had a Democratic director. When challenged by Republican Senator Ron Johnson at a hearing last year, current FBI director and lifelong Republican Chris Wray encapsulated why the GOP theory is bogus.
I see an FBI every day that conducts themselves with integrity and professionalism and selflessness and rigor. And I do not accept the characterization of our performance in this particular case.
That is not how I characterized it. I'm talking about partisanship at the top with some specific partisan actors. I said the vast majority of the 38,000 are people of integrity.
And the idea that I, as a Republican appointee and a lifelong Republican, am biased in the way that you are describing makes absolutely no sense.
Look, I have asked numerous high-profile Republicans, senators, members of Congress on this show to explain how they can be so certain the DOJ has been weaponized against them when so many prominent Democrats have been targeted. Some ignore the embattled Democrats and just skip to talking points. Others claim that the Democrats just must be really, really guilty. And the most conspiratorial suggest that Democrats are being charged just to cover for charging Trump and others. None of it is persuasive, none. And I'm just tired of political leaders on both sides trying to escape their own legal trouble by just going after our system of justice. It is the very definition of putting your own interests ahead of the country's. The legal system's after you, just burn it all down. No accountability, no ownership for one's actions, just wild, often unfounded claims about a system that's supposedly corrupt or politicized or racist or all of the above. Joining us now is John Garamendi. He's a Democratic congressman from California on the House Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. And thanks for sitting there and listening to me yabber on for the last 15 minutes. But let me ask you about that. I mean, you know, you're on this subcommittee for weaponization. What do you make of my critique? Let me start on the Democratic side of all of these Democrats who, the minute they get charged, they blame race, they blame politics, or whatever the case may be.
Well, that sounds like the family in which I grew up in. There were 7 of us, and when one or another of us did something wrong, we would always blame somebody else to try to remove ourselves from the line of fire. The reality is here, there is substance to the accusations, and that substance has to be worked out through the traditional, appropriate legal process. The investigators, yeah, they found some problems in each one of these cases. And in each one of these cases, it is being worked out through the appropriate process of law. The problem arises when so many Democrats, and particularly the Republicans now, since Donald Trump has the national stage, go after the system of justice in the United States by claiming that it is corrupt and immoral and wrong. The reality, the result of all of that is the reality that the American people lose confidence in the system. And that then leads to the opportunity for our democracy to fail.
I agree with you entirely, but I guess as I dug into this more and I saw how all these Democrats were also blaming the DOJ, that I felt that there was some level of accountability that Democrats ought to have with other Democrats to say, look, don't do that. Don't start blaming the DOJ for your problems.
Well, you're correct. I think I just did that.
Yes, you did.
And I think that there are others that will say that. The fact of the matter is that there's some substance to the charges. Otherwise, there'd be no charges. You take a look at the Mar-a-Lago case and the issue of the classified documents. There was substance there. And the FBI and the Department of Justice pursued it. And Donald Trump basically said, go pound sand. And by the way, hide the evidence. You know, that'll have to work its way out, whether that's true or not, in the appropriate processes. But the overarching problem here is that all of this, Democrat and the Republican, particularly on the Republican side now, because of the national stage that they then have, those issues on the Democratic side, with the exception of Hunter Biden, those are all local. They don't have the national stage. Nevertheless, those are important. But on the national stage, what is happening is a loss of confidence in our judicial system.
Let me ask you about something that your colleague Henry Cuellar, who's also been indicted, said in an interview.
Yes.
He also is blaming it on politics. Let's listen.
My attorneys try to sit down with him and ask him, can we wait? You waited 2 years. Can we wait after the November election that he want to move forward? I certainly question their motives on that. I think I'm the last pro-life Democrat in Congress, but I don't, I'm not one of those, I don't take an extreme position. I think there are exceptions for abortion.
What Cuellar is saying there, in essence, is he's been targeted by the DOJ because he's a conservative Democrat. I mean, that's insane, no?
Well, I would say that that's not a particularly good way to defend yourself. He's going to have to ultimately defend himself on the facts of the case. And he argues, at least among conversations here, that he has a very, very good defense. Going after the Department of Justice, I don't think works particularly well with a jury.
Well, but
now,
beyond that, it's the wrong thing to do.
The case or not.
Right? I mean, I just want to be clear. It's the wrong thing to do. Right. The wrong thing to do for Republicans, wrong thing to do for Democrats, right?
I agree.
All right. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.